Yeah, we're live at 7:03. Almost nailed it. Tonight we want to talk about Gen 3 LS versus Gen 4. We know right off the bat, Gen 4 is better, right? It's stronger, it has better connecting rods. I don't know if the pistons are better. The block has communication tunnels, uses head bolts or head studs that are all the same length. So there are lots of things. It's the next generation, Gen 3 to Gen 4. It's better. The question is, does that mean you have to use that if you're building a turbo thing? I get this question a lot. And that's because we have said, and I mean, people that are out there in internet land and LS land have told people, and logically so, hey, the Gen 4 motor is better. It has stronger connecting rods, which people are worried about, and to some extent as well, they should be. That probably would be the first thing that you would break. I like the shorter head bolts or head studs because shorter ones tend to stretch less, be less susceptible to that if that's an issue. They have communication tunnels, something that they learned when they first did the LS6 stuff. And there was even one of the guys pointed out in the comments when we were talking about this on social media, is that obviously you have a Gen 3.5 where they started putting Gen 4 stuff, particularly connecting rods. So it's easy to tell them apart because one of them is a press pin and the other one is a floating pin. It's pretty easy to tell them apart. If you've looked at them enough, also, you can kind of tell the difference. There's a structural difference between them. Okay, Gen 4 is better. So in a situation where you have nothing, you have no motor at all. Okay, I'm buying an LS for my swap, for my build, for some other thing. Maybe you have an LS in the motor or in your vehicle right now, like I have in my truck. And instead of building that one, you're just going to go get another one from a wrecking yard, or maybe you don't have one. But in any case, if you go get one from the wrecking yard, and like the wrecking yards that I've gone to, there's no difference in price between a Gen 4 and a Gen 3. So if you have the ability to just get a Gen 4 and start with that, you should do that. Gen 4 stuff oftentimes has other things that are better too. You can find Gen 4 stuff and Gen 3.5 stuff that has a good intake manifold on it, like a Trailblazer SS, that has the 799 heads if you want that. Not that if you're building a turbo motor of anything less than 1,000 horsepower, let's say, and even maybe a bit more than that, there's not a bad cylinder head choice there. But what happens is, and this is because this information has been out for a long time now. I mean, this first happened back in the late 90s with the LS stuff. But we're constantly telling people, oh, Gen 4 stuff. It's one of the things that people online will see how knowledgeable I am. I'm telling you, use the Gen 4 stuff. Okay, that's great. There's another level of understanding above that. And that level of understanding is, in the photo that I have up for the thumbnail, is a Gen 3 that made 1,480 horsepower with the stock bottom end. This was the first of the 2 6-liter Big Bang motors that I did. And while I don't advocate trying to run that because it broke, what it did do is make 70 or 80 or 90 pulls above 1,000 horsepower, as did the previous Gen 3 motors, the 4.8 and the 5.3. And don't just take my word for it, because a lot of guys think that, oh, the dyno isn't real and it doesn't tell you what's going on out there. Well, what does tell you what's going on out there in the real world in drag race applications, under the hood of things like Jimmy's Tahoe, but even long ago before that, guys out drag racing, you can make a lot of power with a Gen 3. And that's what my point is. When we're talking about the Gen 3 and the Gen 4, the next level of understanding is if you have an LM7 and somebody has somehow told you and convinced you that you need to upgrade to either Gen 4 internals in your Gen 3, or just get a Gen 4 short block or long block or whatever, that you have to do that because you're building a turbo motor, you don't. If you have something that's sub the 1,000 horsepower, and maybe even let's go all out and say it's sub 800 horsepower. I don't know what that number is. I would have no problem running at the 1,000 horsepower level if I was doing drag racing and I wasn't out. I'm not going to try to run the Silver State at 1,000 horsepower and something like that, because I don't think you could do that anyways with either a Gen 3 or a Gen 4. I don't think that that's a reality. But if you're going out and you're drag racing and you're making hits on this thing with a Gen 3, you are going to break that motor because of something else that has nothing to do with the strength of that connecting rod. we had to go to great lengths when I meaning me and the people that were helping me tune it and stuff at the time, we had to go to great lengths when I first started doing these big bang things to make sure, and it was all part of the design of the test strategy, to make sure that we got to some sort of structural limit of like an internal component. How do we find out? We were trying to find out on the stock bottom end, not any of the other things, but the stock bottom end, the block, crank, rods, pistons, we put ring gap in it and then put it back together with those original rings, the original bearings, the original lifters, all of that stuff. We did do especially on the early ones, we surfaced the block because I wanted good head gasket sealing, because I didn't want that to be an issue. If the sealing surface, either the head or the block, now we had new heads on them, but on the block, if the block was wavy or distorted at all, or not even, because of the gaskets that come off of there tend to leave material there and stuff. So we just surfaced it to make sure that it had the right RA number and that it had a nice, finished surface. So when we clamped the head on there with our ARP head studs, and in the case of one of them in the Gen 4 motor, the CA625 stuff, but when we clamped that on there, that it was it was as solid as we could make it, really, with that combination. Because we didn't want it to lift the head. We didn't, it wasn't going to hurt one of those ARP head studs, and it's not going to do that. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to blow a head gasket or lift a head or do something else. We wanted to try to see what the internal strength was of a cast piston, the powdered metal rod, the cracked rods, the cast crank, the block, maybe the caps will move around. Whatever the thing was, we were looking for that and not the other things. People, before I did the first, what turned out to be a 4.8, before I did that, people were telling me, oh, you can't run. And if you go online, you go on the line and look at some of the forums back in the day and stuff. They're like, oh, you can't run more than 10 pounds on these. Yeah. I'm not sure the piston has a boost gauge and that it would even know that. It doesn't even understand that. It understands what cylinder pressure is, and understands what average cylinder pressure is. And honestly, at 10 pounds, you're not raising the peak cylinder pressure that much. It's not doing that. You know how you can do that is by detonating it. And that's the thing, is if you got guys that, oh, I want you to do it on pump gas. No, that's just silly. We went to great lengths to take care of all those variables. We're looking for just those things I mentioned in the short block. So all the other things had to be taken care of. We had to have enough fuel flow, which we had the right pump. We had big injectors. We had good fuel with high octane so that we wouldn't get into detonation. So we could put some timing in it. We could run lots of boost on it. We had intercooling. In the last two, we had ice water. In the first two, we did not. We just had water. But we had, reasonable charge temperatures. We had fairly high boost, mid to high 20s. The last one was 29.5. It was 3-bar. We had, on the first two, we didn't really have good turbos. On the second two, we had way more turbo than flow than we needed with the S475s. Not the ideal turbos, but ideal enough for what we were doing. If you have turbos that are capable of making 2,000 and you're only asking it to make somewhere in the 1,400 to 1,500 horsepower range, it will easily do that, and do that with reasonable charge temperatures, because the boost pressure is also reasonable. Because the other thing that we did is I wanted to make a number and not just a boost number. We wanted to also make a horsepower number. So we set this up and put good heads on it, and in all but one case, maybe it was two. In 2 cases, we used ported stock heads, and then on the other 2, we used aftermarket heads. But we made sure that we had heads, cam, and intake manifold on there, so when we applied the boost to that, the multiplier effect would be multiplying something that was already making good power. So at a reasonable boost level, 3-bar or less, we would be making a pretty good amount of power. And that's how you do that. You have good NA power, and then as it gets multiplied, we have even more. But the first 3 were all Gen 3 motors. But we made sure that we took care of all those variables. We had a good intercooler. We had high octane fuel. We had, enough fuel. We had good timing. We had big enough turbos. We had enough exhaust coming out of the turbo. We had, in the case of the smaller ones like the 4.8 and 5.3, particularly the 4.8, we had a rising boost curve and a later boost curve, let's say, because we get into the throttle at 2,500 or 3,000 RPM, and then the thing would come up and the turbos would start getting happy later on. It would start making power, on the big end, although we didn't run it more than 6,000 or 6,500 RPM, which we could have gone higher than that. And thinking back now, I would have done that. I would have at least gone to 7, particularly on that 4.8. I would also use different turbos. We'd use probably some of the turbos from Richard Holdener Performance. We either use 2 of the G42s or 2 of the 35s or even 2 of the 3584s, because all of those turbos would get us to where we were with those other motors. But all of the Gen 3 ones, we were very, very surprised when I first started because, and we had lots of people telling us that too. So we had people telling us initially at the beginning, oh, you're not going to run over 10 pounds, that you're going to blow the pistons up or blow the rods up, or whatever. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I already know that that's not going to happen. I don't know where that other number is and what the attending power output is, but it's not that. I can tell you, having run so many stock things like there, as long as the other things are right, it was going to go way beyond that. And it did. We had no idea it was going to go where it went, but we knew the number was somewhere between 10 and what we eventually got to. That's kind of where I thought it was going to be, where I thought something was going to happen, because I had lots and lots of industry experts telling me, oh yeah, cast pistons, you can't run boost on cast pistons. No, you can't run boost on powder metal rods. Yes, you can. And so that's what I'm saying about the Gen 3 motor, is that unfortunately out there in the internet land, and I've said this too, the Gen 4 is better. It is. But that doesn't mean if you have a Gen 3 that if you want to make 5 or 6 or 7 or 800 horsepower at the tire even, that you need to get a Gen 4, because you are not at a level where rod strength is an issue. If you detonate it, neither one of the rods are going to save you. Neither are forged rods. Unless, there might be this like microscopic window where the forged rod will put up with more excessive instantaneous cylinder pressure detonation spikes that the other rods will not do. But again, that window is so narrow that the point of that is don't send it into detonation. That's what hurts it. Not having enough fuel, not having too much timing, having excessive charge temperatures because you don't have cold air ducted to the turbos when you're already going to be, ramping the thing up by 200 degrees or so from just running the boost that you would have to run to make that happen. Don't make mistakes that otherwise cause problems that are unrelated to this strength issue that we're talking about, Gen 3 and Gen 4. People think that, oh, that solves all the problems. That doesn't solve all these other things that destroy 95% of these motors that are not strength limited by the difference between a Gen 3 and a Gen 4. So you Gen 3 guys, so all you Gen 4 guys, don't sleep on the Gen 3 guys. All you Gen 3 guys, you can go a long way with yours as long as you have the other things, long as the other variables are all right. Make lots of power. And we made lots and lots of runs with the Gen 3 stuff. Let's see what you guys got going on. Okay, would you build a turbo Gen 3 LS if you already had the Gen 3 motor? Because remember, I was saying the Gen 4 is better, and if you're going to the wrecking yard to pick one or the other and then the same price, pick the Gen 4. It's fine. That will work. But for the guys that already have it, Charlie Brown, Jet, Bobby, what's going on? I've got a Gen 3, 4, LS1, LS6. That's a lot of hybrid going on there. Rick Porson, VVT are great options to have. Yeah, you're not going to get that with 4.8s and 5.3s. But 6.0s, that's definitely nice. Richard driving home on a long road trip at 8.1, 2,500. HC getting 13 miles per gallon. That's pretty good for an 8.1, huh? Building a Gen 4. Us people should at least have one of each in the LS collection. I think that that's probably not uncommon, that you go and grab, people go and grab LSs. You probably look for, when you go to the wrecking yard, if you're one of those guys and you have stuff in your collection, you probably look for the best stuff. So you look for aluminum motors, you look for Gen 4 motors, you look for 6 liters, and then you go, oh yeah, well, I'm here. I'm going to get a Gen 3 4.8 or a 5.3. Communication tunnel. That's where the cylinder pressure, or it's actually pumping pressure in the crankcase between the groups of cylinders. You have holes in there. A blown forge Gen 4 6 liter, 2 rebuilt OEM spec Gen 4 6 liter, 300,000 miles. Gen 3 5.3 is running strong with just ring grab and reuse head gaskets and head bolts. 16 pounds boost. Nice. I was brand new to this whole thing, but after a year of research and buying a bunch of different things, I think the Gen 3 platform is better, best bang for the buck, and most support, ease of completion. You have other things that you might have to deal with on a Gen 4. If you have VVT or DOD or those kinds of things, you can, not all of them, I think, have that, but that is one of the issues. The Gen 4 project will be annoying because of CAN, cruise, and AC. 6L80. What's the question about the 6L80? Keep timing super soft at high boost levels and make the power with boost. Yeah, but you still can't do that with pump gas. Water injection, when properly done, will open up your tuning window. That can help. Max safe RPM out of an LS6 block, LS1. That's not the block doesn't care about RPM. Don't touch the 5.3 setup. I've learned that the expensive way that your tune is more important than the parts in the LS engine, especially if you're running pump gas. I think a Gen 3 will handle more than you can make with pump gas. Oh yeah, it will definitely. If you're running pump gas, you will not be able to put enough timing and boost in it to hurt any of those things, unless you detonate it, unless the tune is off. Am I limited to using a turbo? No, you can use whatever you want. Intercooling required on E85? No, there are people that run without it, but you should run with it, because intercooling and E85 is better than one or the other of those. I've rebuilt all the 6-liter engines. One's bored to 6.1, one is bored and stroked to 6.6. But if this 5.3 ever lets go, I'm going to get another 5.3. 5.3s are a dime a dozen out there. Aluminum heads are hard to walk past to the guys of our vintage. I agree. I was thinking about that. In fact, that was maybe going to be one of the topics for one of these discussions. Is one of the things that I don't think I'd have talked about when people are thinking about going from, like, let's say a small block Chevy or even a small block Ford, but or a small block Mopar. If you're thinking about doing an LS swap, one of the things I was thinking about is I started thinking about it in terms of aluminum heads, because I'm a big fan of aluminum heads. Iron heads, no, that's a hard pass. So upgrading a small block Chevy, small block Ford, small block Mopar, we just ran the AFR heads on that 340 with Dulcich. But upgrading with a set of cylinder heads on any of those motors that came with iron heads is not an inexpensive proposition. I mean, there are some inexpensive, heads available for small block Chevys or whatever. I don't know if there's any expensive ones for small block Mopars. Maybe the Speedmaster ones. I think that they might have some, but I don't know how inexpensive they actually are. But at any rate, if you're talking about $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever the number is for a set of cylinder heads for a small block Chevy, for a good set, that puts into light the expense of an LS swap. Because not only are you getting an LS, which is going to make more power than the small blocks are going to make, certainly stock for stock. It's going to make more power, but it also has aluminum heads. In some cases, if you go to the wrecking yard and you're there on the right day, you can get a whole aluminum motor. And an aluminum small block Ford or small block Chevy or small block Mopar, an all aluminum version of that is a really, really expensive thing. But even if we just focus on the heads, the cost of a set of aluminum heads for any of those is way more than you're going to spend on an LS that you get from the wrecking yard. Now, I understand you're going to have to do, all the swap stuff, and that's going to be more expensive. But what you get from that is pretty good, even if you just got aluminum heads. But you also get the, a factory long runner style intake, which none of those motors have. None of them have good intakes like that. They certainly don't have a fast, if you were to put that on there. It's a 6-bolt block. It's got a factory windage tray. It's got a lot of good stuff going for it. And it's really, really easy to make power. And so, even the most, and I've shown this in videos before, even the least powerful 5.3, like an LM7, or even the LR4, or even a 4.8 is really close to the most powerful factory small blocks that were ever produced. And those are just like run-of-the-mill truck motors. So they do make a lot of power. And then you put a cam in them, they make a lot of power. So, like I said, I was just thinking that in terms of getting the aluminum head, which is great, and they're good aluminum heads. And you get an LS3, they're great aluminum heads. My nephew runs a set of twin 78s, is the max on the 4.8. He spins it to the moon and does off-road short course, comes out of the hole or corner. That seems like an odd combination to me, that this is an off-road vehicle and it's a 4.8 and he has twin 78s on it. That's something doesn't seem right there. Would you punch out an L33 to 5.7 to do what? What are you trying to achieve? I wouldn't do it if I was building a turbo version of that. But if I happen to have, if I wanted to make NA power, displacement is definitely a way to do that. And if I happen to have a set of 5.7 pistons, then yeah, it might work that way. I love a Gen 3 5.3 because people basically give them away. Is it normal to get some frothy bubbles in the radiator, or do I need to be concerned about head gasket? I would look to see if it's continuing like that. Finishing an L59 Brian Tooley cam engine to swap my LM7 to build for one of your turbo setups. There you go. We like the guys at BTR. Shout out to those guys, and AFR and SCAT and all those guys. I have a Tahoe with a Gen 4 5.3 and a 4L80 with supporting mods. Will the RHP G42 be too big? Goal is 1,000 wheel horsepower. No, it'll be excellent for that. We've already run the G42 on Jimmy's 5.3 driving around, and we were running it with a 4L60. The only thing that I don't know is I don't know which cam you chose for that, but that turbo is the right size for that power level. And it'll be very responsive, much more so than some of the other bigger turbos that would make 1,000 horsepower. And especially 1,000 wheel horsepower. I'm building an LQ 4 6-liter board to 408, twin mirrored 78s, 1150 VS Racing, CNC 823 heads, machine at Wilco's Performance. So are you going to take this thing and run no prep or something with it? What are you doing with that kind of setup? We like aluminum. I thought we liked the cars that go boom. Prestige, what's going on? If you run AFR 195 heads with a TPI on an L98 5.7, is it worth porting the intake manifold and plenum, or do you need bigger diameter runners and throttle body, or a stock TPI with AFR 195s and ZZ4 cam? The factory tune port manifold, the lower, the runners, and to a lesser extent the plenum and throttle body will all hold that back. You will not be able to make what those heads are capable of. Those heads are capable of 500 or 550 horsepower. You won't ever do that with a tune port setup. All aluminum 6-liter go for 1,500 to 1,800 around here. Oh, for the price, you mean? 427 LS long block is worth considering. Do you know anything about Ace's high ram? I've never tried the Ace's stuff. Anyone had experience with fully counterweighted Eagle 4.6 stock stroke crankshafts. I don't remember ever running one of those. I'm going to assume they're stronger, more RPM friendly than factory cast cranks. Are you building something that you need more RPM and strength for? Copperhead gaskets versus MLS. I've only ever used MLS stuff. I've never run copper or hoops or any of that or wiring stuff, so I can't really know. And the most I've ever run is the 1500 horsepower thing, and that was just MLS head gaskets. Do you run the Truck Plus with boost? Yeah, look at the videos. I have lots of videos up with the Truck Plus with boost. We've done a lot of testing with that. Just joined. If you're really worried, asking Gen 3 versus Gen 4, you probably aren't going to make enough power to make a difference. No, I disagree with that statement. Shooting for 600 to 800. I don't think that that's going to be RPM related. We would do that with a stock two valve crank. Getaway, what's going on? Looking at doing the 218, 230 for a customer. I saw you tested it. It's the most overlap I can find on a small cam. Which cam is that? I don't remember running a 218, 230 on a 105. What do you think about Spin Tech mufflers? I'd have to go back and look. The name sounds familiar, and I'm thinking that Engine Masters or somebody tested them, but I don't think that I have. Hello, baby. Hello. What are you doing, Brady? Hello. What are you doing? We've got forged MMR rods and some of the shelf stock board iron or pistons on the 4.6 iron block. Yeah, I don't think 800 is going to be a problem. If it continues, where do you think would make the bubbles temporary? Do you have air in the system? That's what makes it temporary. Fairly new to reaching. Don't really have a clue. Looking for Blitz. What was your question? Scroll back and see if I can find it. Oh. What is it you're trying to achieve? Like what power do you want to make? Because twin 1,000+ horsepower turbos obviously will make 2,000+. Is that what you're trying to do? Otherwise, all you're doing is sacrificing boost response for having those turbos on there. Are you fairly new to racing? How much boost can stock head bolts hold? I don't know. I've never tried to do that. I don't ever do that. We've run some boost with them, but they won't hold what we're talking about for the big bang stuff. Have you done much tuning using a factory Gen 3 knock sensor on a canned motor, or you just tune them out completely? No, Jimmy and Joel are doing the tuning on the... I don't do that normally on the engine dyno, but we've been doing a lot of that. When I say we, I was just there. Jimmy and Joel are doing it, but the knock sensors are always in play. And we've run right now that Jimmy's 5.3 has the Truck Plus cam in it. All cams are wrong cams, and all wrong cams are boost cams, and all boost cams are nitrous cams. It has your cam 85 kissed head with twin 78s and makes 780 across the ramp from 18 to 700. It has twin 78s and it makes 7,800 at 1,800 RPM. Something seems off there. I want to spin it to 72 to 7,800. No problem. That's where my top end combo makes peak power. The Cobra crank I had bent when it spun a rod. 218, 230, 104 is a Summit. Oh, the 5-force race cam. Okay. Yeah, I did run that one. I didn't remember that was that tight. It does have a lot of chop. That's not a cam I would ever put in anything that I would want to drive on the street. I'm not a big fan of like noise cams. Like I wouldn't put a Mother Thumper or any of those in there either. So now the machine shop says the rod that was spun is reusable with a resize. If you spun the rod bearing, is the rod discolored? I would look at that and make sure it's not blued at all. I always throw those away. Personally, I like Spintech mufflers. Have them on 3 different vehicles. We'll also custom make whatever you need. Probably get just one and see what it takes to break it. I don't think you're going to break a crank. I mean, I've never even broken a cast crank. Question, what could I expect power-wise from a stock LQ4 with headers? I ordered the Truck Plus cam and springs from you at a lowered 4x4. I don't know what transmission you have and what tire size and all that, because all that's going to make a big difference. I want to say that on an LQ4, I don't know with the tire. You have a video testing that and a few other summit grinds on your L33. Yeah, I remember testing that name. Yeah, I just didn't remember testing those specs. Would keeping RPM limited to 6,500 help the motor live longer at 800 to 1,000 horsepower with twin turbos? Sure. I don't think that the RPM that you're running with as little as you're going to be doing it, I don't think that that's going to be a thing in longevity. Any other suggested mods? Thomas, headers, exhaust, and a tune are probably good. Most everybody does a cam and springs and then a tune, but you're going to have to get injectors probably because you're going to be making so much power. I didn't think so, but maybe the level was down a little bit, but came back up after I drove it some more. Maybe that's an indication it has air. Yeah, you just want to make sure that you get rid of all of the air pockets. Sometimes it's hard with the LS stuff. You'll have twin GT35s. I'm going to build a stroker. Okay. Stock reused Gen 3 head bolts will hold at least 20 pounds. Don't buy cheap Amazon head gaskets. Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to rate the head bolts in boost, because 20 pounds on one motor could be several hundred horsepower less than 20 pounds on another motor. So it depends on what you're starting with. That's why I don't like that. The boost thing is not a good way to discuss that. I'm rebuilding a 6-liter with your RHP 1200 turbo. Nice. Install the Truck Plus cam and put the cam degree wheel on it. Came out to 109.5 with a new Summit chain. Could that be right? It should be a 111. I had some I had somebody send me, he made some sort of homemade cam doctor thing, and he sent me specs of various different kinds of cams and was trying to tell me what the specs were on one of my cams. And I said, look, that's not even close. You're not even in the ballpark where a discussion is warranted. Whatever you're doing is not accurate. I understand that my 25-inch TPL long runners will bottleneck around 4,500. It'll be higher than that if you put a cam in it with a 350. ZZ4 cam, they'll move up to RPM to 5,500. I was thinking of running AFR 195s. Okay. I think 5,500 might be asking a bit, but let me look and see where some of these were. Luckily, I know a guy who's got some dyno results. Go down to small block Chev. Go to 350. Give me some tune port. Give me some tune port love here. 305. We don't want that. What was it? Where was this one at? Yeah, with stock when it was 5,000 or 46 or 4,800. So I don't know that you'll get all the way up to 55 with that. Maybe. Let's say RPM always helps motors. I like that. I don't like running excessive RPM. I mean, it sounds really good, like that 8,000 horsepower D-stroked LS3. Sounded good at RPM, as do all of the motors that they've run at Westech where you're running a high RPM. So, because there's a number of those that have done that, and it sounds good, but I don't want to pay for that. Do bigger cubic inch engines run smoother on tighter LSAs? Yes, it tames the cam down. I'm new to seeking ideas from the goat. Yes, I do want to get as close to 2,000 horsepower as possible from a forged bottom end. I don't. What do you mean? What's reaching? I don't know what the reaching thing is. But yeah, if you have the turbos are going to dictate whether or not you can get there initially in terms of airflow, whether or not you have the strength of all of that stuff. 2,000 horsepower is a lot. If you're trying to do that with a stock block, that's not going to do that for very long. It was this color, but the machine shop said it's good. I trust him. Okay. This dude wants me to put together a 5.3. It sounds like a NASCAR. This is his only request. Drivability and power be damned. High-rise single plane carb. Okay, that's a kind of cam you could do it with. The mainly MMR rod should be good. 1,500 horsepower. Okay. But you're not trying to do 1,500 horsepower, right? Engines Anonymous. That's a big block Chevy. Yes, a 496 can run more cam with the same idle quality as a 454 or a 396. I'm interested. Let's see. If I make over 700 horsepower on the stock NPI long block and it doesn't grenade, I'll send it to you for a big bang. A 5.7 G2O, when I do the cam, is it worth porting and polish the heads or just razor blade rebuild it? Ported heads will make more power, but are you putting a big enough cam in it to take advantage of the ported heads? And what heads do you have on your 5.7 GTO? Are they like 241s on that? People are using stock head bolts. Yeah, you can. We've run boost with stock head bolts, but I remember internet myths out there. People talking about that. Stock head bolts are better than ARP. No, they're not. They are 100% not. Nobody that makes lots of power uses stock head bolts. Truck will probably end up on a 31-inch tire. But it's got 456 gears. LQ4 truck plus cam headers plans to do the GT500 blower eventually. Okay, all of that will work. Did you used to tune the ignition timing on those TPIs to increase the total timing curve? And what's a good total timing number? I did all of the tuning, well, way early on when I wasn't doing tuning on the tune port on any of the motors because Tom or Ernie, sorry, Ernie, man, I couldn't remember your name. And Eric and Ish or whoever was doing some of the stuff when I wasn't doing it, but when I started doing my own tuning, the timing that I would put in it was the amount of timing that the motor would tell me was the right amount of timing, and that's usually a function of the cylinder head. So it's usually a combustion chamber thing. Big block Chevy with bubbles in the radiator. Okay. BTR hot rod cam, the heads I have. Check what they are. I bought my first LS the other day, Gen 3. You can imagine my surprise when I opened it up and it had Gen 4 rods. So that's a Gen 3.5. Or maybe it was rebuilt, but the Gen 3.5 stuff that has Gen 4 rods in it, like the L33 that I have. Would an LT5 converted to blow-through carb make a good 1,200 street car with twin 35? An LT5, what? Like the 400 horsepower 01 motor from the 90s? I have both an LQ4 6-liter and an L98 6.2. Plan on doing forward rotating assembly in the 6.2. Can I use the stock 6.2 connecting rods in the 6-liter? Yes, but you're have to balance it. The 5.3, 6.0, 6.2 all use the same length connecting rods. Nick, it's an L33. Yeah, that's what mine is too. Those are good. I really like those motors. The hot tick is if you find one of those in the wrecking yard, look around for another motor that has the Trailblazer SS intake manifold on it and put that on there if you're going to buy the whole motor. But then if you find one that has a Trailblazer SS on it, it's probably also going to be a good motor. Like I got a L86 or an LC9 or something that had that as well. I got to put that thing back together. It's got all the forged stuff on it. Fancy forged. What spin text do you like best? Trying to find the Trailblazer manifold. I think we have some of those for sale. Oh, the LT5. The reduction injected LT motor. Isn't it already supercharged? And doesn't it have port and direct injection? I mean, isn't it already really good? And no, I wouldn't run it carbureted. A transmission will hold up to 2,000 horsepower. It's going to be a really, really expensive one. You can get 4L80s that will do that. Something weird happened. I opened up an M7 stock. I don't know what M7 stock is then. If it's an 89 L98 block, the main cap bearing said 0006 USA, and my rod bearing said 130S from the factory. Isn't that weird? I don't know. I don't know what the factory ones say, so I'm not familiar with any of those designations. Anyone have any success doing dual injection on Holley Dominator systems yet? Software technically says it would allow it. You want to do port and direct injection, or you want to do 2 sets of port injectors? Can you put Gen 4 rec port manifold on the Gen 5 long block? No, I mean, there may be adapters for that, but otherwise the manifold's not going to bolt on there. The angle of the heads is completely different. And the port, all of it's wrong for that. But the good thing is that you don't need a rec port manifold, because the manifolds that are on the Gen 5 stuff are already really good. I think the Stage 4 Pro LS truck swap Summit cam is what I'll go with. How does your Truck Plus compare? I don't know what the specs are on that one that you're talking about. I want to get a Gen 5 5.3 and then get a port injection manifold on it. Well, that's already available. They already make that. Holley has that already. You can put a high ram on there that's port injected, and you can switch over to port injection if that's what you want to do. It didn't come with the intake system. Heads down. I have a Camaro intake, but none of the EFI. I don't think I would go the direct injected route with that. I think I would just go with an LS and port injection, because it would seem like it would be a lot easier. If you guys are the guys that are here talking about Truck Plus cams, you need to go get them now, because the price is going to go up on them. So you need to get them. You need to get them now. Also, we're going to have some sales coming up. Not on that, but we're trying to figure out what to do for the Black Friday stuff. And if I did a cold air intake from a DIY ram air, would that help the TPI at all? Because those stock systems are very restrictive. Yes, it would definitely help. Cold air, always a good idea, and also always a good idea not to restrict it with that thin over the radiator stuff that they did on a lot of those. If you can make an elbow, that's kind of why I like the Ford stuff that was a side entry, because it kind of gave you more access to getting cold air to those, because that front mount stuff, and the LS is like that too, making the turn before the radiator is problematic. We know, we went through that doing the turbo stuff. Might just do it whole hog if my latest business venture takes off. Don't know if anyone's done it yet. Richard, I have an LS3 Corvette. I know the LS3 intake is really good, but at what RPM does it start falling off? I really don't want to over cam it. Well, even if you put the biggest cam that you could put in there that would fit with available factory piston to valve clearance, your LS3 intake manifold would still be better than the other intake manifolds up to I mean, if you take a look at the LS3 intake test, look and see. I mean, that has a good size intake. I mean, it has a good size camshaft in it. And then we did a stroker version also. But for the vast majority of the RPM range, that LS3 intake manifold is hard to beat, regardless of what kind of camshaft you have in there. Nervous to do the cam bearings on my L33 because of the horror stories people talk about, but I don't want the stock narrow ones with the highest lift cam. You're worried about cam bearings and high lift cams? Why are you worried about that? Some of you better off buying your tuner pod package or an MPVI3. I don't know what the question is. Are you wanting just different hardware to put it in? Would you feel safe with an S480 on a Gen 353 looking for 850 horsepower? I've heard if you run a higher stall converter, keep it out of peak torque, it will live. You won't be able to run a high enough stall converter to keep it out of peak torque. If you run a 5.3 and put ring gap in it, I wouldn't be worried about 850 horsepower at all. Do you already have the S480? If you don't, you should get a G42. Funny pull, as I had the engine and transmission pulled out of my refrigerated van. I was thinking about a single turbo earlier. Would you build a turbo Gen 3 if you already had the Gen 3 motor? 89% yes, which as we know, 89 is basically 100. Yeah, Don, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. How did you run the TPIs on the engine dyno? Did you use a harness for each sensor? I don't know what you mean by for each sensor. We ran a Holley or a fast standalone ECU. And so we were able to control the injectors and the timing independent. I mean, they weren't independent. We ran an MSD distributor. So we were able to put in whatever timing curve we wanted. And we were able to make the air fuel be the air fuel that we needed it to be. Let's say 12.8 on a naturally aspirated motor. We were able to make the air fuel be what we wanted it to be. Should I put a 1050 on a Lamborghini V12? I think you're gonna have a hard time finding the intake manifold for that. But otherwise, why would you do just one when you could do two? Forums have told me that the narrow version cam bearings will fail with an aggressive cam and the heavy valve springs. The forums told you that? They did back when the forums were in business 20 years ago? Nick, that's not a thing. We have never had that happen. We have lost cam bearings, but we lost cam bearings not when we were running high lift cams. You're saying you got a separate ECU. Yeah, we have a standalone computer. We have a Holley HP, or way back we had a fast XFI probably. It's a good low profile cathedral intake manifold. A fast, an LSXR. That's connecting rod for an LS turbo and way. Are you saying why? I don't know what you mean by best. How much power are you trying to make? And do you mean best like it costs the least? Best like it's will rev the high. I mean, I don't know. Is it weight or what are you talking about? You if you have a stock block, and if you do and you put a forged connecting rod in it, you're no longer worried about the strength of the connecting rod. You're worried about the block or the stock crank. So I wasted $80 on the Durbon HP cam bearings and shake my head. You didn't waste any money if you already have them. But I don't know that that was necessary. In all of the count, I mean, I don't know how many there are. In all of the engine testing that I've done, I have never upgraded the cam bearings. I take that back. I don't want to say never. I probably have almost never upgraded the cam bearings. We have put cam bearings in some of the motors, but honestly, when I had the machine shop do that, I don't know that they upgraded to a wider bearing. Got an LS question. Can a Gen 3 and Gen 4 rods be swapped without rebalancing? No. I mean, you can and just run it and see what happens, but they're not the same weight. I prefer the Gen 3 fuel rails. You like the return style setup? with the little regulator. I was thinking about making an adjustable version of that regulator, but I just don't know that there's enough of those out there, because it would be fairly easy and it would be like chock full of ability goodness. Would you build a turbo Gen 3 motor if you already had the Gen 3? Yes, that's the right answer. If you already have the motor, just do that. If you don't, and you can get one that's the same price, get the better one. Yeah, we would never run on the person that was asking about the tune port stuff. I would never run a factory ECU on the engine dyno for a tune port one. Those older ECUs are not very fast, and they would be EEPROM stuff, and they would be really problematic. I've been down that road and I went down that road with the Honda stuff. And so we went from the S100 to the S200 to the S300, where we could just go in and use a computer and do it. And that was great. I mean, I did a lot of EEPROMs back in the day when I was doing Honda stuff. But it takes a long time to do that on the engine dyno, to program it and to burn these chips and put them in and make sure that they're right and not bend all of the things, all the prongs and stuff. It just makes it so that you get less done in your testing. It's incredible how much misinformation there are on LS forums. Every time I ask a question, put those guys to shame. I don't, and I'm not trying to do that. I think that people with this Gen 3, Gen 4 stuff, when they tell you that the Gen 4 is better, it is. But it also steers people into thinking that that's like a universal thing. That like if these cam bearings work on 99% of the motors that people put together, and yes, the other bearings have more surface area and maybe they would be less apt to spin, but if the other ones are not problematic, then you've solved a problem that may or may not really exist. Gen 4 crank is cheaper than rebalancing. Return system for turbos are easier for me than a deadhead. And the update on the turbo manifold, yes, we are making it. What power level would I be at with a 408 stroker, LY6 rec port heads, BTR Stage 3, PDS cam, and stock LSA blower? I have no idea on the blower stuff. You're limited by the blower in that case. The LSA blower is not going to make as much power as that motor would be capable of making. So the blower is going to determine whatever the power output is. And I'm hoping you put really big injectors in it. 85 pounders. Probably going to be enough for that power level, but it's going to really like E85 if you run that. So there's no cam bearing problems. There have been some cam bearing problems, but in my case, there have been way more no problems than there have been problems. If I get something like the Fast XFI, can I burn the data on a PROM and put it in my stock ECU? No, it doesn't allow you to do that. Those two management systems are completely different. You would only be able to, and there probably are systems to be able to manipulate the factory system to be able to tune it. I don't know what that stuff is anymore from the 80s and I guess 90s. I don't even know if I'm sure that people somewhere, they have to have the ability to do that. But a standalone system, you don't have to do a PROM and then put it into something else. A standalone system already has a harness and everything. You just do that and leave it in there and drive around with that. Would a stock Element 7 pushrod work with your low buck truck cam? Yes, most people run that. You'll end up pushing 2 Grand National turbos. John Current 357 has uncut Firebird to 937, 75 horse fogger, intake pipe, and never broke an old engine. And what is that on? Did you? As long as you don't damage the bearings during the swap, you should be fine. Be careful; it's easy to nick one. Yeah, don't try to toss the camshaft back in, and don't try to yank the original one out. Or for 700 the wheels on E85, what turbo would you pick? I would pick our G42. Moat shut down, so finding chip burning stuff is harder than before. I'm running Ford LE47s right now on upgrade. I'm going to target FIC 1250s or 1500s. Okay. Is it safe to swap to the wider cam bearings? I'm scared of how people say you shouldn't swap cam bearings without having them align honed afterwards. I got the soft Babbitt performance version from Durabond. The way that the factory does it is they put the cam bearings in it and then hone it for the camshaft. So I don't know how close the cam tunnel is to being right when they put the new bearings in without honing the bearings. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to get with a machine shop to find out if that's a reality. Grand National turbos are tiny. Yeah, I mean, they were designed for a 245 horsepower motor. And we know that they'll make more than that, but not infinitely more than that. There's a limit to what turbos will do. That's what happens when you start turning them up. You're like, oh, this is glorious. And then they go, yeah, guess what? There's no more. Well, and the bad thing, and this is how people break turbo motors a lot, is they keep trying to turn up, like if you have a factory turbo, you keep trying to turn it up, and it keeps turning up to a point, and then it only turns up in the early part of the RPM range. Because as you keep trying to ask the turbo to go more and more, it'll give you more and more if you have the wastegate right and the spring and all that stuff. And if you can keep turning the boost pressure up, it stops giving you more boost at the top because it can't support that boost pressure out there. But it can support it, like it can't support it at 6,000 RPM. Then it can support it at 5,000, and then it falls off after that. And then it can support it at 4,500, and it falls off, and then 4,000. But what it does is really ramp the boost up there where it can support that. Unfortunately, that's just giant. Those are just giant torque and cylinder pressure numbers, and then that's how guys end up hurting them. Who owns cam bearings? The factory does. I'm going to run my L33 to 9,500 RPM with stock rod bolts and 60 pounds of boost. That is an excellent idea. And you forgot, and hit it with a, I guess let's say a 500 shot, because that would be better. Maybe a 500 fogger shot, because that would definitely be the way to go. Would you build a Turbo Gen 3 if you already had the Gen 3? Still 8911 and 123 votes. That's a lot. 500 shot right off idle. Yeah, to get the turbo spooled up, right? That would be good. I've been watching your videos on the Chevy 292 from years back. Think I'll ever go back to test the 292. Not a 250, but maybe the 292 will run that again. I get it now, so I'm probably the best to get my TP on the engine dyno with a fast XX buy and tune. That way I can get the most out of the upgrades. Yeah, I don't think I would suggest fast. I would suggest Holly if you're going to do that. Holly will be a better choice. Got one more minute. Blitz, I don't know what your question is. Or what factor increases RPM? Are you asking what cam factor does that? Do you recommend Phytech for wiring? I don't know. I've never used Phytech stuff, so I've never tried them. If you're asking what factor on a cam does, duration usually changes where RPM, where it makes peak power. The LSA can. Lift doesn't typically do that unless you have a motor that responds very well to more lift, like it was wanting more lift, like it has a lot of cylinder head flow, and maybe it keeps going at 700 or 800 lift because it's a race motor, and then you give it that, and then it goes, oh, hey, look, now I can breathe. So you may make power at a higher engine speed, but duration definitely. LSA, yes. Lift, less so, but possible. I bought a new daily, so my old daily could be a project car. There you go. If anyone's curious, Ford LU47s are good for 450 wheel horsepower on a turbo 85 setup with 60 pounds of fuel pressure. The gas pedal increases RPM. Shorter runner length increases that too. Head flow can. Second Holly just ticked over 100,000 miles. My Mustang Terminator X-Max. Micro squirt module works great. Older TPI setup if you like learning it. Yeah, that's probably less expensive too than a Holly is anymore. Had great success with a Gen 3 5.3 till it dropped a valve. Now I'm going to push a Gen 4 4.8 and see how far it will go. It will go a long ways. It will go way into 4-digit stuff. And as will the Gen 3 4, 5, or 4.8 and 5.3. Both of those will go long ways into that. I mean, we did 12 and 1300, and neither one of them were anywhere near maxed out. I'm leery of no-name valve springs. We have tested some valve springs because we're doing valve springs. And Jimmy and I went through a bunch. In fact, I just went through a whole valve spring thing the last time I went down to West Tech, where we were measuring lots of stuff, spring rates and max RPM, installed height, all of that stuff. And there's bad ones out there. I just want a truck cam and any boost. Exactly. With a bad head gasket, compression would be down on those cylinders, right? Yeah, and if the head gasket's bad between two cylinders, it will be those two cylinders. What is my personal engine set? For which car are you talking about? Saw a gas pulling truck with turbo on micro squirt make 1,000 horsepower. Is impressed. I don't see why it wouldn't be able to do it. If a micro squirt will give you the air fuel that you want and the timing that you want, the power level is not an issue. I mean, that's just a function of the fuel flow, really. And on that note, guess what? It's already been past the 1 minute mark. On that note, it is time to go, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.